Hi. Between Morphogene, QPOS, XPAN, and Mimeophone, we have quite a few ways to create stereo motion in a patch these days. And as I've gotten more experience under my belt with these modules, I've come to realize that usually the simplest stereo motions are the ones you can hear the most distinctly. For example, panning a single source back and forth with XPAN, or doing a dual inverse radiate with QPOS. If we do both these operations at once with different CV sources, we do technically get a more complex stereo motion, and it can certainly give the impression that the sound is wider, more complex, etc. than a mono sound would be. But if we want to hear these motions in their most dramatic form, they're best done one at a time so they don't obscure each other. So I started to think, can I have it both ways? Can I perform a few different modulations, one at a time for maximum clarity, but have them all going in the patch anyway? I realized that the easiest way to do this is with one of the most classic and useful Eurorack modules ever made, the Doepfer A151 sequential switch. I usually demonstrate patches using only make noise modules. Not because we don't like other modules, we do. It's more that we like to use the modules we make to demonstrate concepts with the assumption that people watching will expand on the concepts using whatever modules or instruments they happen to have. But for this particular concept, the sequential switch is going to make it a little bit easier to execute. And as always, you can carry the concepts out to whatever instruments you may be using. So here is the A151, hanging out in a little pod with the XPAN. Here's what we're going to do. And by the way, I recommend putting on headphones for best results listening to this patch, as it's mostly about stereo modulation. Our sound source is a square wave from Zero Coast. We can hear it through the XPAN, then the QPOS, then the Mimeophone. Here are three operations we can do on it. Pan, radiate, and skewed rate. Let's take a single CV source, which I'm going to pull from the sum output of the maths. We can use it to pan the sound. There's a couple reasons I'm using the sum output. One, this will let me mix and match some CV sources as we go further along. And also, it'll let me easily ensure that the voltage source coming into the XPAN is bipolar, which will let me fully modulate pan while also letting it stay in the center when it's not being modulated. I've done this by setting channel 1 to be inactive, channel 2 to midnight, channel 3 fully negative, and channel 4 fully positive. This creates a plus or minus 5 volt swing with each cycle of the channel 4 function. But let's go ahead and check out a few destinations. We already have pan. Now let's hear a modulation of radiate. With the left and right radiate controls modulating in opposite directions, this almost even sounds more dramatic than the pan modulation because it shifts timbre at the same time as it shifts the apparent center in the panorama. And then another thing we can do is the rate control on Mimeophone with the repeats skewed. This will modulate the repeat time in opposite directions on the left and right side. So where the A151 switch comes in is that it will let us take this single source and switch it between these three destinations. Let's sequence our VCO using zero control, clocked by the same maths channel we're using to modulate. patch the 3 outputs of the switch to our 3 destinations. And we'll use the first step gate output to switch between them from one to the next using the trigger input. Let's take the zero control clock out and use it to clock the woggle bug. This will let us add some randomization to the stereo modulation, or even replace it completely with stepped random modulation. All depending on the setting of the output of the maths channels. Before we go, I want to make sure to remind everybody to check out the patch sheet and patch sharing links in the video description. And if you have any favorite patches for Zero Control, Zero Coast, or Strega, or any combination of the 3, feel free to share them using that link, and we'll build them up and take a listen here on the channel. Happy patching.